Welcome to Indian Times with Kevin and Leo.
And today we have a special guest.
Yep. Mr. Frank LaMere, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
So, a lot going on this week. National Congress of American Indians, they're meeting in Washington, D.C. this week. It's their winter session, and with so much going on in Indian country, especially related to Donald Trump and the new budget that just came out this week. The National Congress of American Indians certainly have a lot to talk about. But I guess I was hoping to focus our show today just on Frank, if you're okay with that, and just talking to you about the various things that you've been up to lately and in the past. You're a very accomplished person. You've certainly done a lot for Indian country, and it's always been my honor to know you over these years, not just professionally but personally as well. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, pleasure to be here. Look forward to it.
Great.
And it's always good when people want you to share your perspective, and sometimes it seems like you're always on the defense. I spend most of my time being on the defense, and every now and then if somebody says, well, share with me your perspectives, I appreciate that. That's always good.
Can I start the questioning? I got a question for you. And Frank, I have just recently become more of a community, supporter of different issues, and even a community leader on certain issues. And I've been coming into more contact with more prestigious Native elders. Okay, and to separate like the traditional way and the political way and the professional way, sometimes I kind of blur those lines, and I wonder how someone feels about it when, let's say, for instance, you're old enough to be my father. So when I first met you, I called you Lekshi. Lekshi is uncle, but it's also like an uncle figure, someone who is an older male that you kind of seek guidance from, or you kind of follow their example. And so when I said it to you the first time, we were actually at KZUM 89.3 radio station. I was a radio host there, but your reaction was you were very comfortable with it. You didn't correct me or anything, but I've done it with a few other Native leaders, and I get the same reaction. Like, I don't get a real response about it, but like, how does it make you feel? Does it seem acceptable? Because I've never asked anybody. I just kind of presumed I can do that.
Well, the way I see it is that, and I don't even know if it is specific to any tribe, but I do. The one thing that we grow to know, that I've grown to know in my life, and I've done a better job of it as I've gotten older, is that I always show, whether an individual is older or younger, male or female, I always make it a point to show deference and respect. And because I don't know, how far they've traveled, I don't know their experience. And among us as Native people, that wealth and title mean very little, and I have just learned that it is good always to acknowledge, all. And when younger people come and make that acknowledgement, and even in Winnebago they come and say, Dega, it's good to see you, I stop and I try to make sure that I understand, because I have many nieces and nephews. And I try to identify who they are, and I try to acknowledge as best I can, but sometimes there are so many of them, it's hard to do. But when any younger person comes up and say, Dega, I want to talk to you about something, that's a show of respect. That is an acknowledgement that there's something that you can tell me that will help me in my life and what I do. And I think that's generally the way that elders feel when you come and you acknowledge uncle or grandfather. I greet you, and I want to talk with you. Then as elders, I believe we automatically stop and listen and pay attention to that. The formality that we had as Native people generations ago, it's not formal like it once was, but it's still here. That understanding, I believe, is innate. that understanding that there are things that you know that I wish to know that can help me to live, to grow, and to flourish. And there's a way that I can ask that information, get that information from you. And that's by a simple show of respect. And I always, long and short of it, is deference and respect. I always try to show deference and respect, no matter where I'm at. If people are older or younger, I'm sitting in a room and I try to acknowledge each and every person there, because each and every person, some of them came a long ways, some of them came a very short ways, but they're all there for a reason. And it's always important that we as Native people acknowledge that. I acknowledge that, in different ways. A lot of people have heard me say, and I remind us all that when there's a large gathering, that I've come to know as an elder, I've come to know in my life that there is no coincidence. And I've even come to know and to understand, to feel and to articulate the fact that all is preordained. Everything is the way it's supposed to be, and we are directed to be at certain places, certain times, and the Creator does that for us. Even this today, it is no coincidence, the date and the time and how it came about. And so when the Creator puts a good number of people together, old and young, male and female, He does that for a reason. And it's important that all gathered, when we do gather, always acknowledge each other as best we can. Sometimes it's hard to do in a large setting, but I always try to do that. Everyone who comes is very important. Everyone who comes brings something. I will go even a little further to say that I remind myself and I remind others, from time to time, I believe that Mauna, I believe that Tunkasha, I believe that the Creator of all things sends you people every day. And all of us as Native people and others should think about that, should stop and reflect on that a little bit in their own lives. The Creator, even with me, the Creator will send somebody to me every day. And it's not always a prominent individual. Not always somebody has title. Not always, perhaps somebody who has very little. But the Creator sends you something every day, and He sends you somebody that you can teach something to. I stop and I think about that all the time. He sends you people that you can teach something to, so you must try to do that. But let us not get too caught up in our own self-importance. The Creator also sends people to me to teach me something every day. He puts us together, all of the people, He puts you together, and you're going to teach things to one another. I've come to believe that, and I also, maybe it's good that to remind us at this place, at this time in our country's history, there seems to be just a lack of respect among people right now, everywhere, and it's all over, and I think that as the Creator sends you people to teach you, He also sends you people that you can teach something to. And what I want to say about that is that sometimes the Creator will send you somebody. With me, it probably happens every day. Send somebody over to me, and I look at that person and I don't understand them. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what they represent. Sometimes I don't understand their words. And all of us are like that. Sometimes I'll even say the Creator will send us somebody. We look at them, we don't understand them. They're foreign to us. Sometimes the Creator will send you somebody you don't even like. And that's with all of us. And what I've come to understand is even that person that you don't even like, pay particular attention to them, because the Creator sent that man or that woman over to you to teach you something about yourself. Those are things I've come to understand in my life just through interaction, thousands of them, tens of thousands of them. And I believe that's how it is. The Creator sends you somebody every day. Teach them something. Let them teach you something. Respect each and every person. The ones you don't understand, find a way to understand them if you can. Sometimes you cannot, but at least you will have tried.
Thank you so much.
So back to the budget, huh?
No,
I kind of sidetracked us a little bit over there.
no, I wasn't the one to talk about the budget. Actually, I just mentioned it because it's something going on in DC. Just to acknowledge, I guess. But no, I was more interested in just asking you about kind of what you've been up to lately. I know you've been pretty busy. You've been fighting the good fight on a number of fronts, including Whiteclay and the Zachary Bear Hills case up in Omaha and the raid. I know you just submitted a letter, an editorial. I know that our website published, and hopefully some others will too here. But a lot of issues that you're voicing concerns about. I'd love to hear from you more about kind of what's going on with some of those things.
I guess I could say if you don't maintain a sense of humor, you'll go crazy. And I always say from time to time, a cowboy's work is never done. And I will always say there's never enough time to pay the attention that we need to pay to certain things. But I always add that that's a good problem to have. That tells you that we're using the time given us as best we can, to try to make things a little bit better. And there's a need for that. And as I said before, there's a need for that in this country, unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. And these things that happen in Washington, D.C., there's a connection, and it impacts us right here in our communities, impacts us in our families, our extended families. And all of us need to stop and kind of reflect on those things, how this feeling that's come across the country, how it impacts each and every one of us, and a lot of it is quite negative. And some of that, I think, impacts Native people, that general attitude that people have about, or that lack of respect that people in the country, that intolerance that people have right now in the country, it impacts us. I will say, as I've said 100 times, Indian people are like the miner's canary. If there's something, that we feel and something happening to us as Native people, I reminded somebody of this just today. I had said that we're like the miner's canary. If there's something that's going to impact us, pay attention to it. Do what you can to assist, because it's only a matter of time. Weeks, days, months, years, when you're going to feel the impact in your own family, your own extended family, your own community, among all of your people. And we've come to know that in our life. And when there's things that impact Native people, everybody should be watching. And of course we know, and I will just keep it as general as I can, this assault on the sovereignty of the Winnebago people. It is, it's very simply, and I noted in the editorial, it's a slap in our face. It's a slap in my face as a Winnebago. But we have to stop, and we have to deal with that. We have to try to see what we can do, to coalesce, to come together, to recognize one another, to give each other our voices, and to do the best we can to encourage each other as Native people. And I think all tribes, all Native people need to watch these things when they happen. Because if they do, the ATF does that in Winnebago, Nebraska to the Ho-Chunk people, they'll do it to you in New Mexico, in Washington, South Dakota, North Dakota, Arizona. That's the nature of how things are, with Native people in this country. And so I think all of us have to watch that issue up there very closely and have to do what we can to give voice to the Winnebago people. And I think what we have to do, and I said this today, it's been a couple weeks, and as I noted in the editorial, there's no public outcry. And I've been busy. I stay so busy on so many things. I've stopped and I listen. And somebody is going to say something. Somebody, one of our state senators, our two senators, our three congressmen, somebody will say something. Somebody will question, did that need to happen? Was it excessive? And Nebraskans, carried Nebraskans, native people from all over, I waited for that tremendous public outcry. And as I noted in the editorial, I did not hear it. And I'm taken aback by that, and I'm disheartened for that. But as I also note in the editorial, well, the public outcry has begun. And sometimes that public outcry begins with you and you and you. That's how change is made, because people have been so conditioned. Our own people have been conditioned to feel very small, that nobody pays attention to me, nobody cares, and many times they're probably right. But what we need to do when the support doesn't come from without, we have to build each other up within. And that's what needs to happen on this ATF issue right now. They trampled on the sovereignty of the Winnebago people. It has to be addressed. All of us have certain talents and abilities to try to elevate that discussion, and I'm going to do everything I can to elevate it. And just as sure as I'm sitting here, when I come across my good friend the governor, I'm going to ask him, well, Governor, did you have something to do with that? And I will say that to him, and as respectfully as I can, I will impart to him that I have an idea, and maybe that's how you think about me. And I'm not going to ask you if you do or if you don't, because, I don't know if you'd be truthful anyway. But the fact is that I think a lot of people here in Nebraska knew, and now they'll all beg off. But people knew what was going to happen there, and nobody did anything to stand in the way to say maybe that's excessive, maybe it's unnecessary. But I think what we do now with regard to Winnebago is we elevate the discussion. We draw some parallels that I've tried to draw in the last couple of days. And then we elevate that discussion. We let all of Indian country weigh in. The Winnebagos, the Omahas, the Santee, Lakota, Nakota, Dakota, our relatives here close. I think we have to come together, because if they do that to me, they're going to do it to you next week. And what I thought was so interesting about that, there's so many parallels that I could have drawn. But I drew the one about Whiteclay. And in 1999 at Whiteclay, we went over there to stop the death, the destruction, the devastation. We went there because of the murders of Little John Means, Ronald Hardheart, Wilson Black Elk. 2,500 Lakotas, I remember, came there in 1999. And all of us went over to Nebraska that day to pray for that town, and to pray for change among the people, and to pray that that the flow of alcohol would stop. And as a lot of people remember, Nebraska sent out 90 of their finest, I'm told, and 40 federal officers, some of them even native people. 130 of them stood across the road, and a number of went across that day, and they arrested us. And I've always said I never have understood what for, because I never paid a nickel in fines, and I still can't know why. I don't know why we were arrested, because we walked across the line. But I want us to think back, as we think even about Winnebago 2 weeks ago. What the Oglala Lakota people wanted to do is they wanted to get well. They wanted to sober the people up. They wanted to stop the death, the destruction, the devastation, the impact of fetal alcohol syndrome. They did it for their people. And what we did as Nebraska, we sent out 190 of our best and 40 others, and we sent them to stop that. And I said, I was naive, and I've come a ways in those 20 years, but I was naive. And I truly maybe thought that the reason they came there that day was for something else, and they told me it was a lot of different reasons, but I've come to find out exactly what it was, is they were protecting big alcohol. They were protecting Budweiser. They were protecting Coors. They were protecting a host of others who have made hundreds of millions of dollars in Nebraska, exported the wealth south and or imported the wealth south into Nebraska and exported the misery onto Pine Ridge. They did not want that flow of alcohol to stop because we made millionaires out of people and made those corporations, the Anheuser-Busch, even richer than they are. That's what that was about, and we fought until we closed them down recently for good. That was a battle between the Oglala people, their supporters, and big alcohol. And fast forward ahead, 2016, Standing Rock. You know, and we take a look at that, and what they did is they sent out police dogs, and they sent out law enforcement, they sent out military.
Water cannons.
Water cannons.
Yeah.
And they treated our people badly up there, and we thought naturally that, well, this is a question about states' rights, federal rights, responsibilities, the Constitution. The Constitution is always looming in the background. And now we come to find out, and they knew then, and we know even more so now, that it's big oil. That it was the Indians versus big oil. The Indians versus big alcohol. And now in Winnebago, it's the Indians again versus big tobacco. And by elevating the discussion, I just want all of our neighbors, native and non-native, Indian people everywhere, and people in Nebraska to all own that. Say what it is. Then maybe we can do something. And quit wrapping ourselves in the flag and doing these things under the color of law. It has nothing to do with the Constitution. It just has to do with Indian people may derive some voice. They may derive something from this. And they may be even empowered by this, so we're going to stand in the way. And so when you think about that, you know, the hundreds at Whiteclay, the hundreds at the Standing Rock, the 50 in Winnebago, and all of these having to do with us here. And I'll tell you something, maybe we pick our fights. And as I said, I believe it's the tribes versus the whole world. It's indigenous people versus big everybody. But that's a good fight. And at the end of the day, when we look back and history looks back at this, and can say all of our relatives back then who did these things, it was good. Because maybe by then, we in this dominant culture will have learned and will have understood what we've done to ourselves, to our neighbors, and to this Mother Earth. And nobody spoke out except some tribes over there. And those who spoke out were the most impoverished of the most impoverished. The powerless of the powerless, the most disenfranchised of the most disenfranchised of all of Americans are the ones who always speak out, because we have that affinity for ourselves, for one another, and for the land. So I think the issue in Winnebago, we've got to elevate that. We have got to continue to elevate that discussion. And as I said just yesterday, gentlemen, there was no public outcry, so it begins. Each and every person, native people, you know, if there's something that troubles you, there has to be an outcry. That's the way it used to be with us. Our relatives, our forebears would see something, and they would say, that is going to be harmful to us. It's going to hurt me, going to hurt my family, my extended family, going to hurt the generations to come. We have to go do something. And now they have us so beaten down. We've even lost sight of the importance of just saying something's wrong. Hence all the silence when these things happen. But the more we talk about these things, the more we elevate the discussion. And I believe at the end of the day, even in Nebraska, I believe at the end of the day when our neighbors see and understand and come to know, I think they'll be there. It may be at some point Nebraska versus big everything. Right now it's not.
So okay, with the big tobacco and ATF and how they're trying to bully the Winnebago Tribe and Ho Chunk Inc. right now, because they want part of their money from tobacco sales from a sovereign nation. Uh, on the outside, looking in, how does, okay, because I have a lot of people that follow myself, Kevin does as well. How do they help pressure the organization, the government, the people who can actually bring this to light that there's a problem here? How can they pressure those people? Because I know a lot of times people, when I say, hey, you know what, that this is a wrong that's happening, we need to come together, we need to bring light to this. The first question I get is, how? How do I make a difference? How do I pressure them? What can I do? You know, and so a lot of times people are interested in it, but they just don't know what to do. You know, well, what can you tell people like that who are listening, who actually do want to make a difference but don't know how to?
Well, you know, I hear that question many times over the years, and there's a lot of ways to answer it. But I always, after I have been asked a question 1,000 times and answered 1,000 times, I've come to a place where I feel good. When somebody asks me that question, I simply say, do what you can. Well, that's not the answer. Well, you know, but I simply say, do what you can. Because I've been around a room full of people and I say, what can I do? And I could say, well, pick up that telephone and dial this number and tell the governor this is not good. And then if I was them, and I asked somebody a question and they said, do something that takes exactly 30 seconds or a minute, I would say, is that what you think of me? That that's all that I can do? I'm ready to do battle. And that question is asked by everybody. They're ready to do battle. They're not ready to do battle. There's something they can do. And I always say, just do what you can. And then analyze in your own life. Because each and every person, even listening to this, everybody, all Native people have been given certain talents and abilities. I don't even know what they are, but everybody has certain talents and abilities. And I think whatever it is, those talents and abilities we have, they're not given to us for ourselves. You know, they're not the Creator, whatever I can do, good, bad, indifferent, the Creator to say, Frank, I'm going to let you do these things. I'm going to give you this. And I want you to use it for yourself. I don't think that's the way it works. I think we're given talents and abilities by the Creator to use it in our families, our extended families, and among the people. To use those abilities, even to speak out. And maybe I have an ability to speak out. Maybe I've just been through so much that I don't even care. You know, and I don't worry about that. And maybe the Creator put me through all these things to get me to that place. Frank, I don't want you to care. I want you to go in there and demand that meeting. Even if it makes you uncomfortable, go do it. And so a lot of times I'll do that. And I don't know if it's a talent, it's an ability, it's something I've learned, but I use that for the people. I've always said whatever talents and abilities I had, I should have decided a long time ago to be rich. Because I think I would be rich. But that, whatever ability you had, I think it was an ability to help give some voice to somebody. Help stand up for somebody. Help somebody who does not have opportunity to say something for them. And I chose to do that. So the question is, what can you do? I always say, do what you can. Maybe simply speak about it. Always, always elevate the discussion. Always elevate the discussion. And when you elevate a discussion, that means there's give and take. That means people agree, they disagree. And when you elevate a discussion, more times than not, there's going to maybe even be an argument. But that's good, because you're making people think about the importance of an issue. So in everything I do, I tell people, always elevate the discussion. Don't just say something that doesn't offend you, and don't be worried about, being offended.
Yeah.
I mean, just elevate it. Substantive discussion, do what you can. I don't know what that is.
There's one thing that you've said before, and I've kind of been telling people this now, is a lot of times there's people that'll say, well, it's not my place to do this, or it's not my place to do that, or say that. And I tell them, and this is something I heard from you actually, was you have a moral authority, you know, and you have a moral obligation if you see that there's a need there and nobody's fulfilled it, but yet you know how to, or you have an inkling to actually try to. I said you do have the moral authority to make changes for the better, you know.
I'm glad you remind me of that. I'm glad that you said that, you know, because that's so important right now. And as we sit here right now, as I think through everything I've seen and I've been through even in the last 48 hours on 2 or 3 different fronts, it occurs to me that people, if I was to take the state of Nebraska, and who in this state of 1.8 million people, who has moral authority to talk about change? If I did a good assessment, did my list, my God, out of 100 people, that probably half of them would be Indian people. You know, so how do you figure? How do you figure? Moral authority, as I've said before, moral authority comes about when you experience things. Moral authority comes about when somebody's sitting at a table telling you how it is and how good everything is or how everything is with Native people. Disagree with you. I don't have those degrees you have. I don't have that title. I have no legal authority, but my sense tells me, my experience, everything I've been through in my life tells me that you're not totally right. And because my whole life has been, I've invested my whole life in working for change. I've invested time and energy away from my family. What little I have, you invested in trying to give voice to people. And if you're going to try to give voice to people and you're wrong, I'm going to tell you. And I don't even care who you are. Because that moral authority comes about because of our experience. That moral authority comes about because how we've been mistreated. Moral authority comes, you know, with everything we've been through in our lives. It makes us understand something. It makes us understand a need to speak about something. It gives you, it's moral authority. I have I have a lot of moral authority on things. So when it comes to law enforcement, I have moral authority there. Well, what gives you that moral authority? Because I've lost family members to homicide. I've been with many families lost their lives at the hands of law enforcement in this state. I've been victimized. That was where my moral authority comes from, because I've seen that. I begin to understand it. And when you talk about that, I'm going to stand up and say I have something to say. And Indian people, because of how we've been disaffected by everything around us, by our environment, we have a lot of moral authority about how things need to change. But the other part of that challenge to Native people, to everybody, is that moral authority means nothing if there is not a moral imperative that goes with it. And that is what I share with non-Indian people, with our friends, our others, the dominant culture. By the authority vested in me, I hear that all the time. Over here at the legislature, the committee work, the votes, by the authority, all of these different agencies, by the authority invested in me. I hear it every day. Means nothing, because there's no moral imperative that goes with it. Having that authority means nothing. Learning all that you've learned, experiencing, enduring, surviving everything we've gone through as Native people, the heartache, the hardship, it means nothing if there is not a moral imperative that we have to try to change that. I really believe that.
Can you guys excuse me for a moment?
Sure. So Frank, are you in town for something in particular this week, or?
Oh, I came over today, as a matter of fact, for 1 or 2 reasons. And one thing to talk a little bit about opioids.
Yeah.
You know, a principal I know who works for the state, I wanted to discuss a little bit about opioids. And wanted to talk about briefly the correlation between alcohol abuse and opioids. I wanted to find out today, or begin to ask questions about the tie between alcohol and opioids. I'm understanding, sadly, of the many thousands who have lost their life to overdoses in this country, that there are figures that are very high. There's a direct tie between opioid overdoses and even alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
That alcohol is involved, or alcohol was first used, and the opioids were taken. And I want to find out a little bit about that. You know, the ties between alcohol and opioids for a lot of different reasons. But one of them, of course, being using those things together. I wanted to find out a little bit about that, especially for people we deal with up in our part, meth use, of course, up in you know, northeast Nebraska. So I came over to find out, and I also stopped in, of course, to we have a new candidate for governor. He was an independent and decided today that he would be
Oh,
a
yeah.
Democrat. So I went
Chris.
over, Senator Chris, and went over to listen to what he had to say, and to talk with him briefly, and even to tell him, if you're going to send a message, and you better be getting to Indian country.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him he needs to make it to Macy, to Santee, to Winnebago, and you need to talk to those urban populations. I asked him that directly. He said yes, he would. And I want to hear what they have to say. So even that, we will, as Native people, elevate the discussion. You know, right now you have a governor, and I don't know if he does much hearing things, and I don't know if he comes very many places, but now maybe he has to. That's the way I see it. You elevate a discussion. Chris came over here, Governor, where are you? Chris, the governor was over here, he said this on this matter, where are you at? That's the way politics works, and so I came today to meet Senator Crisp and to wish him well.
What do you think about him switching from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party? Obviously, that's been a topic of conversation in our state this week.
You know, that's been a topic of conversation, Kevin, even in my own household.
Yep.
You know, my wife, just tremendous, you know, and I mean, even in Indian country, she has been just real outspoken, you know, Democrat, prominent Democrat nationally. Little known fact that Cynthia LaMere was one time, for a term, was the vice chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party.
Oh, wow.
Probably one of the first Native women,
Yeah.
and that's been 15 or 20 years ago. She was prominent in this party. And another interesting thing I should share with you, of course, is I am the associate, the vice chair of the Nebraska Democratic Party.
Sure.
So both of us have been there. But we have had some very spirited discussions about independence. Very spirited discussions about switching as an independent and voting in a Democratic primary. We've had spirited discussion about independents who decide to be Democrats. And I simply want to say that irrespective of what side we take, over 2 or 3 days we battled to a draw.
Yeah.
and we simply deferred to the party statewide, who in a democratic process have determined that Chris switching is good. And independents who wish to vote in Democratic primaries, that's good. And I feel good about it, because I mean, that's the way the process works. You have to work hard, and there's no givens, and a lot of people are undecided, so they are welcomed into the Democratic Party. I think it will have a positive effect. I think it would be good for the Democrats. And I don't know how things go, but whoever the Democratic candidate is, you know, they'll have to battle 2 others. There's 3 candidates they'll battle, and whoever it is, I think, is going to put up a good fight in this gubernatorial race, simply because of the atmosphere in the country, the toxic, you know, environment in this country right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, you know, later this year.
Yeah.
It's going to be a very exciting time, not only locally, not only in the state, and you know, but I'm going to say even across races in the country. I think and I say this as objectively and I will say objectively, and I think a lot of people will agree with me, Democrats, Republicans, or independents. I think the Republican Party going to get taken behind the woodshed this year. That's my feeling.
It's a lot of people's feeling, yeah, that there's really a groundswell of, you know, kind of grassroots anger, kind of righteous anger about, you know, this presidency and just kind of the general idea that women are being disenfranchised, and you know, you have the whole Me Too movement trying to bring awareness to sexual harassment and violence against women. And you have a president, you know, who's been pretty outspoken in the other direction, you know, saying some pretty ugly things about some of the victims of some of this violence and harassment, and you know, calling them out rather than the perpetrators. And so I think a lot of people are thinking that there's going to be a lot of angry voters who are going to head to the polls in this coming November. And yeah.
And you know, it's going to be an interesting time for the country, because people now are going to have to step up and to say, here's what I did, and here's what I'm thinking in this next election. You can't just, I say this in all honesty, you know, I run into a lot of Democrats. I'm a Democrat. I run in and talk to a lot of Democrats. I don't run into too many Republicans. I've not heard anybody say, Frank, I voted for Trump. I don't have people come and say that. I know they're there, and I see their bumper stickers, but I don't have people. I don't hear it in the coffee shops very much.
Yeah.
But I hear the Democrats are getting excited and they're getting organized. And I think it's going to be a good year in Nebraska. I think it will be a good year in the country. But you know, for the sake of Native people, I have always said this, even as a staunch Democrat, with our Native people. I've always said for years and years, and a lot of Indian Republican friends I've known over the years, good people, they agree with me on this one. You know, I don't care if you're, we need more Indian Democrats. We need more Indian Republicans. We need more Indian independents. We need more Indian Green Party members. And I always like to point out we even need a communist or two. But we as Native people need to step up and take our rightful place in our political process, no matter how we view things in the country. And I think that's extremely important, and I think we'll do a lot of that this coming year. So I don't begrudge any Native person who wants to get involved politically. As an independent, more power to them. But get involved.
Yeah.
Doesn't do any good to sit back and throw rocks. I have a lot of Indian people throw rocks at the Democrats, and well, how did you vote? Well, I didn't vote. Well, then don't waste my time.
Yeah.
I mean, in all honesty, we sit back and we watch and see how things go, and then we complain. Then we do nothing for 3 years, and then we start complaining again. Native people need to step up so they can impact races locally in the city. And I think we'll see a lot of that this coming year. It's going to be an exciting year.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, recently you got to meet with the superintendent of the Nebraska State Patrol, and you know, talk to him about or recommend, I guess, the creation of a cold case unit to investigate unsolved murders in Whiteclay. And have you heard anything else about that? Have you heard anything more from the State Patrol about that request? Or
earlier, you know, in discussion today, there was a question about what can I do, and I answered that by saying you do what you can.
Sure.
Well, I took that to heart today. They wrote the editorial was published in Indians.com, and we'll see where the editorial goes right now. But in that editorial, it talks about Whiteclay, of course, talks about a lot of things. Well, you need to know how I do things. As I shared that editorial today with the Colonel Bolduc of the State Patrol, I sent him a nice note, and I sent a note to one of his lieutenants. And I said, I want you to read this, and because it reflects on how things were at the State Patrol a number of years ago, in 1999, when they led the effort to arrest Russell Means, Frank LaMere, and Webster Poorbear, and others. And I want him to know that, because that I'm simply reminding him that's where we're coming from. And I said, well, we need to talk quietly, but we'll have a talk.
Mm-hmm.
A part of that talk is follow-up to a discussion we had about 2 weeks ago. I asked the principals over there must have been 7 or 8 of them. The brass over at the State Patrol met with Ryan Brewer, former tribal president at Pine Ridge, myself, and John Meisch, and several others. And we met with the State Patrol to talk about the establishment of the cold case unit,
Mm-hmm.
to go back and look at unsolved murders in and around Whiteclay, not exclusively there, but around Nebraska. We even brought that to their attention. And I want to share that from that meeting, the Nebraska State Patrol agreed that if we have Nebraska citizens who are concerned about the suspicious nature of deaths in and around northwest Nebraska, in and around Omaha and Lincoln, and we bring that to their attention, they would look at it. That was huge for them to say that,
Yeah.
because I'm hearing from time to time, people will reflect back many, many years on a suspicious death somewhere, to bring it to my attention. And I asked the State Patrol, would that interest you? And they said, yes, it would. And irrespective of establishment of a cold case unit, they will look seriously when those allegations come from Nebraskans. I'm very pleased with that. We're waiting, because that was the initial meeting, and I hope that we're going to meet again and talk about how we are going to put together an effort to look at unsolved murders. And that term cold case, that doesn't resonate so much, with the State Patrol.
Mm-hmm.
They have a different approach. That's what I know. It's like a cold case unit. Well, that's what I know, but they approach those a little differently there. And I've even talked with principals in the Omaha Police Department, the city of Omaha, who have told me that they would be amenable to being a part of an effort like that, not as a cold case unit. I don't know why that people don't run away from that idea, but not as a cold case unit, but as a task force.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
I think it has something to do with jurisdiction. I think it has something to do with how they would put together a unit. How does it work? How does it function? But we've had some agreements from Omaha, and I think the state of Nebraska would entertain simply the idea of what can we do to collectively come together, forensics and otherwise, to see what we can do to solve some of those murders at Whiteclay.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many of them. I felt very good about that meeting with the
Good,
State
good.
Patrol. I feel
Mhm.
very good about our interaction there. They have a new man there now, and I just get the impression that good will come from that, and there will be a collaboration that will be put together. So I feel very good about that.
Yeah.
But I wait to see what the next step is, and I believe the next step is another discussion, and maybe we bring other parties together. I mean, all this stuff will be public at some time, and I always like to be forthcoming on these things, because just that's the way we should be, just be truthful. I would like the city of Omaha to collaborate with the Nebraska State Patrol and put together a crack task force to go to western Nebraska and take a look at the deaths of Hard Heart, Black Elk, Little John Means,
Sanford Wounded Foot?
Sanford Wounded Foot,
Mhm.
Sherry Wounded Foot, and others, because there are others. And to go look at that, and we've laid that on the table with them, but we'll have to see if we could build that collaboration. I've had separate discussions with Omaha who are agreeable. Nebraska they'll have to come together and figure out how something like that would work.
Hmm.
But I cannot see how they would feel, how they would stand in opposition to it, because it would simply be a way of doing their work, and I think they collectively do the best they can at State Patrol, and I think that Omaha does the best they can. I believe that, as I've said many times, we're looking at something different. A lot of this is around Sheridan County. If there's a breakdown in law enforcement anywhere in these 93 counties, my vote is Sheridan County.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever even heard of a murder ever being solved in Whiteclay? I mean, we're talking about 5 very suspicious, several of which are clear homicides, but at least 2 of which are very suspicious deaths in Whiteclay. None of which, I mean, I've never even heard of a suspect being named in any of those cases. I don't know. That's troubling.
We asked the State Patrol,
Yeah.
do you have people out there, investigators? They have one who is, and this isn't being critical, it's just the reality.
Yeah.
They had one who investigated a murder out in that area, not in Whiteclay, but in that area. So they could probably use some support, and that's what
Sure.
we'll try to sort out.
Mhm.
No, but I agree.
Mhm.
I believe if Omaha went there, I have a strong feeling that Omaha would be able to uncover things that others have not been able
Yeah,
to
I like that
uncover.
idea. Yeah.
Because they have an investigative team and unit there that is probably as experienced as any, maybe in the whole Midwest.
Yeah.
We shall see, especially on murder investigations.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Well, I'm just happy to see that you're continuing the fight there in Whiteclay. I mean, everybody thought that once the Supreme Court decided, state Supreme Court, I guess, ruled against the lower court, which had reversed the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission's ruling. Anyway, everybody kind of felt like this whole issue was dead, I guess, once the beer stores were closed, and it seemed like there were going to be no more appeals of these decisions. I'm just glad that you're keeping up the fight there, 'cause there's plenty left to do. I mean, it's not only are there unsolved murders there, but you have a community that has just been racked by violence and alcoholism and just really a lot of other unfortunate things in that community that need to be cleaned up and just sort of fixed up. So
Well, the work is, as we've said, the work is just beginning.
yeah.
And I share this with all your listeners, those who tune in. I will share with you, and I've said it, but I'll say it here. We've done nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to congratulate for what? We've done nothing to change the way things are among the Oglala Lakota people. We've done nothing to mitigate the damage that we as Nebraskans have been responsible for 113 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done nothing. We shut them down. Now the work to restore begins. Now the work begins, and I want to keep that thought upper. I want to keep it uppermost in my mind, and I will. I did not do this for years and years and years. Just say, oh yeah, we won. But that means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Won nothing. The whole thing will go on for the rest of my life and for the rest of a lot of people's lives. It'll take those who are going to be most impacted by our work, those who are going to feel the effects, those who are going to benefit from all the blood, sweat, and tears put in at Whiteclay. Not hyperbole, and I'm not trying to be heavy, but the people most impacted by this, who will benefit from this, who will live and grow and flourish, not even born yet. Parents of those we talk about, not even born yet.
Mm-hmm.
2 and 3 and 4 generations from now, those young ones who have a chance to live, grow, and flourish won't reflect back on how that came about. They shouldn't have to. But that is what I see happening there. It'll take generations for them to be restored and to mend that hoop, that they talk about. I did this thing in Omaha Press Club recently, and I talked about that. I had a talk on the day the Supreme Court made the decision, 8:01, September 29th. I had discussions that day with Brian Brewer, and we talked about that. And we had interesting, quiet talks about that. He reminded me, and it's even hard to say it because it's moving. He said the Lakotas have never got to win. He said, we never get to win. Indian people never get to win. And he said, but we won one. And just, if we think about what he said, is powerful. Because, and we went further in our discussion, and we reflected back on what Black Elk said about the Lakota people and what many tribes have said, the Winnebagos, others who talk about those seventh generations. Our spiritual leaders told us about that, how long it would take us to mend that sacred hoop. And I told Brian, my math isn't good, but it's good enough for me to know that we are right in the midst of that seventh generation. And I said, and you're no Grotto Lakota, but I'll share this with you and react if you will, and he didn't. I said, I have a strong feeling, the way my mind works, that that seventh generation prophecy was realized at 8:01 on September 29th. And that healing began that day. And that hoop it's going to begin to mend itself. And all of us here, all of us listening, we're privileged to have been a part of that. We don't know anything about it right now. It means nothing right now because we're right in the middle of it. It means nothing. It's all around us. Generations from now, they'll talk about what happened there. And they will realize that that's when the healing for the Lakota people began. And Brian told me the last time we won, he said, was June 25th, 1876, at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And he said, we have been paying for that ever since, but now we won, and now we can begin to heal. And I think that whole thing is it's been a spiritual journey if we ever stop and think about it, and we pray about it. We've done that quite a lot. It's been a spiritual journey. We have been privileged to be a part of something way bigger than we were. And I'll say again, because every now and then one of our dominant culture, one of these Wasichus, one of these Micah days, they'll come to me and say something. They'll say something about Frank. I even had, I won't say because I have respect for people, a very prominent, powerful political figure, and months ago came and told me something one day. He said, Frank, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. It was a greeting. He didn't even say hello. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I didn't think it would ever happen in my lifetime. It was a miracle. And I just sat because I knew what he was talking about. But I want us to think about that because it was. This was a miracle. I mean, even weeks before this, people were telling Frank, I don't know why you do that. It's never going to happen. Well, I don't know. But it's a miracle. And it's much bigger than we are. And I think it came about, I don't know, maybe some things that we tried to do, it came about because of that, but I think it came about, as I've said sometime in the past, I think what happened here was his prayers were heard. I've said for a long time in my work and everything I do that the prayers of the children are very powerful. They're more powerful than ours. They're more powerful than those of the judges, the senators, the presidents. The prayers of these young ones who prayed that their mother and father be sober, that their mother and father get along, that they be able to have enough, that they be able to be happy in that house. I believe that they prayed, not only at Pine Ridge, but everywhere, for generations among our native people. They prayed for that. And I think the Creator hears those prayers. But time, I understand, is different over there. It's different than us. But the Creator heard those prayers. And I answered them, so he answered them. And I think that what will happen is people will explain this 100 different ways of how it happened, but I know how it happened. It happened because of prayer. And it happened because of prayers of the little ones. And so the Creator, let there be a miracle. And that's what happened. We all got to be a part of that. Never in my life will I ever be able to be a part of that again. You know, and it's a miracle that's ongoing because we're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
We're not done. It's starting now. There will be many miracles, thousands, millions of them now in Indian country and in Pine Ridge, because every young man, young child, barely born last night, may have a chance to live, to grow, and to flourish because of our work.
Yeah. I felt like what happened with Standing Rock caused a lot of us to wake up and actually realize that moral authority, like you have been talking about for a long time, way longer before this podcast. But I think that's what actually woke me up the most, to be able to tell myself that, hey, you know what, I can make a difference. And what I noticed was that there's a lot of other men and women out there that are just like me, who may have not got a formal education in politics or law or counseling, but yet we're doing our part now to heal things. And you know, and as it happens, I can see the change. I can see things happening amongst us. You know, that there's a fight for balance now, where before there wasn't. It was just a big boot, you know, a big boot on everyone's back of our necks, and then now it's, you know, we're pushing back. And I think that's what created someone like Trump, someone who was so outlandish, but yet they made him their leader of America, and it was almost like a desperate tactic to try to take back the power that they can feel being pushed up against, you know. And it's not a power to where we're trying to suppress anyone else, but it's a power where we're actually just trying to be treated as human beings, and have the right to live, and have the right to preserve the planet, you know, our mother. And so whenever you speak on things like this, it makes me feel a lot more confident and encourages me to keep going on what I'm doing, you know. And it is a miracle. And I want to tell you that I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do. I appreciate you here. I appreciate your words, because as you can tell, they do sink in sometimes. And thank you for coming today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here any time. I mean, you talk, and what you mentioned, Leo, is very important, because if you had not had those feelings born of Standing Rock, feelings born of Whiteclay, feelings born of the shooting death of Bear Heels, the deaths of so many, if what those things did is they made us wake up. And if we had not had those feelings, if something we need to do, we wouldn't be sitting here. We wouldn't be talking about big oil, big alcohol, big tobacco, cold case units. And years ago, 30 and 40 years ago and beyond, these things wouldn't be happening. They wouldn't be bold. We're being bold. You know, young people are beginning to be bold again, and I see that. And when I was much younger, we were bold. We were bold. And now I see there was a long period of time, it was quiet, but now people are being bold again. But we always have to urge each other on, especially young people. And I'll get back to Winnebago, and I'll be able to address a number of folks, as I've been too busy. But I'll ask the tough question: where were you? Because it has to be asked, and I can ask that now because I don't care. Because if I was there, I would have had to have been arrested. I don't care who you are. And where were you? And those are the kind of questions all of us in Nebraska and the country we need to begin to ask each other. When you try to take this sovereignty, I'm going to fight you. And as we said very simply, Kevin, in the editorial piece, I'm afraid of you, your ATF, and these people with these water hoses and these dogs. I'm afraid of all that. Afraid of your law enforcement. I'm afraid of all that. And I don't want to be slapped. But if you slap me, I'm not going to be afraid anymore. And that is where we're at. You slapped us. I'm not afraid of you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not afraid anymore. I'm going to fight you now. And that's where we're at. We're getting to that place. And it's easy to pull people apart. It is hard to get them together. And you have a president in a country that wants to pull everybody apart. We have got to unify as Native people, not just here, but everywhere. And we have to begin to protect that sovereignty. Good God, what gives you the right to think you could come onto these lands, into this small part of these lands where you squat and say you can do this? And I will say that as sure as I'm sitting here, that'll have to be said for a long time, and we have to say it and say it and say it until they understand. But with efforts like this, we'll get it done. Thank you guys for allowing me to be here. I loved it. And I love the weather over here, you guys. You must be living right.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, we're going to conclude with that. And did you have any last words?
No, nothing. Thank you for joining us, and just so honored to have Frank LaMere here. He's been a role model for me for a very long time, and it's just a real honor to have you on. So thank you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right.